Hey folks, Mike Naso here with the latest on the tropics. We have a lot to cover today. Taking a look out there on the left side of your screen, the storm with the big hole in the middle of it, that is Hurricane Hilary, a Category 4 hurricane. It peaked at about 145 miles an hour. Thankfully, it's starting to weaken. It's going to weaken very, very rapidly as it impacts the Baja and spreads moisture into the southwest U.S. That happens much more frequently than people think, but there's a lot of doomerism out there, so I want to set the record straight. In the Atlantic basin, you look out there and we don't have much, but we actually have areas that might become something. We have a wave here off the coast of Africa that has a high chance for development the next few days, one here in the central Atlantic, another area approaching the Windward Islands, and then we have this area near the Bahamas that could get into the Gulf of Mexico and maybe do something. So we're going to talk about all of these items of tropical concern. First, we're going to start with Hilary, since that's the biggest problem out there. As of 3 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, it is at 18.7 north, 112.2 west, and it's 130 miles an hour. Like I said, it was 145, so it's gone from a high Category 4 to a low Category 4, and it's expected to continue to rapidly weaken, which is great news. It's moving northwest at 12, and again, that motion should bring it right along the coastline as either a very weak hurricane or a tropical storm in the northern Baja, but the official forecast from the Hurricane Center does make this a tropical storm as it moves into Southern California. Now, that has happened before, but it is rare. What is not rare is moisture moving into the southwest U.S. It happens all the time from storms, but because of the likelihood and the potential of tropical storm conditions, we do have watches and warnings out. Obviously, we have a hurricane warning for the Baja from Punta Abarejos to Cabo San Quentin, and we have a hurricane watch for the Baja north of Cabo San Quentin to Ensenada. However, north of that, we do have a tropical storm watch for mainland Mexico, northward to the Baja, to the California-Mexico border, and all the way up to Point Mugu. And that's Catalina Island. This is areas here of Southern California. Now, if you look at that on a map, what's disturbing is that does include San Diego and Los Angeles. So that's why, obviously, there's a lot of people screaming the end of the world and climate change. I can tell you they do get impacts in California, but it's not always happening every year, and times have changed to where you hear about it a lot more now. There's Hurricane Hilary. Again, it's still a big eye on it. Is going through an eyewall replacement cycle. We're starting to see the wind field expand there. And the recon that's flown said it's weakening, which is great news. It's going to continue to weaken very quickly. The waters get cool. The Pacific is not as hot up there, and that is what hurricanes need to stay strong. So this is not going to make landfall as a hurricane in the Baja, or certainly not up in California. If it is a tropical cyclone still, it will be a tropical storm, but still, a tropical storm over Los Angeles, that's something else. Look at the rainfall expected. The biggest threat, heavy rain, 4, 6, 10 inches in some areas there between areas of Las Vegas and Los Angeles, all the way up to Fresno and areas of Vegas there. You guys are going to get in on it, and it should spread up into the southwest. It's funny, when we have wildfires, we need the rain, and then when we don't have wildfires, we don't need the rain, and it always hits when we need the rain, or when we don't need the rain. It's always something. So right now, there is a threat for flooding, and it could be pretty high here in areas just towards the west of Yuma and to the east of San Diego, especially. The closer you get to the Baja, the higher the likelihood of heavy, heavy rainfall and potential flash flood risk. So be very careful. California, it's always something with that state, I'm telling you. I remember back in the 1990s when I was a kid, David Letterman had Johnny Carson on the phone, retired in California, and said, "Hey, Johnny, how are things out there in California?" And Johnny Carson said, "Not bad, the mudslides are putting out the fires." So it's always something for Californians. So the key messages for Hurricane Hilary: number one, heavy rainfall will begin well in advance of the center. You saw it's a large hurricane, and so that will go from the Baja California Peninsula into the southwest United States. Preparations for the impacts of flooding from rainfall should be completed, as heavy rain will increase ahead of the center on Saturday. In the southwest U.S., flash urban and arroyo flooding is expected, with the potential for dangerous and locally catastrophic impacts. Number two, hurricane conditions are possible in that warning area along the Baja, and we also have the hurricane watch there. And we have tropical storm conditions possible late Sunday in areas of Southern California, and we do have a tropical storm watch in effect. And of course, large swells will continue. I'm sure the surfers will be trying to take advantage of that, but it could be dangerous, and life-threatening surf and rip current conditions are possible. So I'd stay out of the water. There it is in Spanish for all the population of California that speaks Spanish. Now, I wanted to point out, Don Penham on Twitter makes a really good point that millennials, my generation, we were not alive when areas of Southern California were flooded badly by Hurricane Doreen on August 17th, almost to the day, in 1977, 46 years ago. And if you look at the newspaper, the main story was that Elvis had died. So if there's anybody alive who remembers when Elvis died, there was a very bad flooding hurricane affecting the desert. So don't tell me this hasn't happened. It's just when this stuff happened, people were smoking in hospitals and sleeping in discotheques. You know, this stuff happens, but it doesn't always happen every year. And I think sometimes our leaders, or our so-called leaders in some cases, forget that these things are natural. They're Mother Nature. And that weather might happen once a year, or it might happen once every 50 years. You just got to be ready for it. Hillary is no exception. Now, in the Atlantic Basin, we have 4 areas we're watching. The first is a high likelihood of development, an eastern Atlantic tropical wave, but eventually it's going to run into wind shear and head probably out to sea. The second area is a mid-range chance for development, and that one is expected to also run into wind shear in a few days. This area could be a little bit more of a problem. It's a low chance for development, but it is going to probably head towards the northern islands, Puerto Rico, in the Bahamas, Turks Caicos area there, and there's some indication you might eventually see it try and bend west under a ridge of high pressure. I don't know yet. That's still really long range, but that's our third area of concern. And our fourth area of concern, which is a mid-range, is the area over the Bahamas that is expected to move into the Gulf of Mexico and move generally towards Texas, although if you're in Louisiana, I'd watch it too. And that could develop. So the next names are, we had Arlene, we had Brett, Cindy, and Don. So Emily, Franklin, Gert, and Harold. So we'll wait and see if we get any named storms out of this, but we're getting close to things really heating up in the Atlantic. Now the sun's starting to set, so it's getting dark out there, but there's our first system in the far eastern Atlantic. Definitely a twist to it. If it develops, I don't think it's going to get very strong. It looks like it's going to move into more unfavorable conditions, but it could be what we call a name waster, to where it takes up a name and we go on to the next one. This area has some sort of a circulation with it, and that does look like it could develop as well and head off in that direction and have a similar fate as the first system. This wave has some curl to it. This could be a problem. Watch this one as it moves through the Windward and Leeward Islands and up towards Puerto Rico and the Bahamas, and potentially a bend back west or towards the southeast coast. That could be an issue. Or maybe it'll stay farther west and be a Caribbean cruiser. Don't know yet. And this is the area here in the Bahamas that we're watching that could potentially move into the Gulf and do something. So right now, if you're in Corpus Christi, Texas, or if you're in the Leeward Islands, or if you're in the Bahamas, anywhere. Oh, and if you're in Los Angeles, be on alert just in case you have impacts. So we're going to watch all the tropics very carefully. Right now, the main story is the moisture and flood threat heading for the southwest from Hillary, and we're going to keep an eye on that as well as the rest of the tropics. I'm Mike Nasel with the latest on the tropics. I will talk to you guys next time.